what it's like 5 years after I made my first video here on this channel. It was the catalyst for this channel starting. And although the channel's not very popular, it's a way that I've been able to really express myself and help myself integrate what's been happening to me along the way. So here we go. It's about, I'd say, 6 years after I had what I'm gonna label as my spiritual awakening. First, I want to say to you all that these sort of events, a spiritual awakening, comes in many different forms for everybody. I believe that everybody has the possibility of having an awakening. I can only speak from myself. This is my experience. This is an experiential channel, so I can't speak for everybody. But what I will say, it's in my belief that everybody can have a spiritual awakening. Maybe they don't call it a spiritual awakening. Maybe they refer to it as a cataclysmic event, or it comes across in another way, such as something traumatic, a death in the family, a loss of a loved one, or a marriage, or a job, or a child being ill. There's all sorts of cataclysmic ways that can really shake our reality. But what I will say is, my personal spiritual awakening didn't come in the form of a traumatic event. What I will say is, as I'm looking back, that's what this video is about, kind of looking back and integrating what I've learned and what I've experienced, is that I had many small, different cataclysmic events that had happened to me over my lifetime that led me to this point where I would say was the actual event of my spiritual awakening. So for me personally, the micro traumas or the complexities, and even for me, the very serious life-threatening illnesses that occurred for me earlier in youth, that, if you don't know my story, led into kidney failure, dialysis for several years, and 2 organ transplants. So that is an event enough to cause an awakening. Something about that experience for me of when I was sick, it challenged me to the core. I became very introspective about my experience, and I started to take my knowledge of mindfulness, Eastern study practices, yoga specifically. I started to actually apply what I was learning in those practices while I was sick, and it helped me greatly. And there was a way that I could show up even in my, I would say, my sickest times with a sense of grace. I really was a fighter. I really was a warrior. I didn't let my emotions show too much because I was working so much on myself and really connecting with what we'll call the spiritual realm, or the realm that's beyond what we see here in the physical, that it gave me this intrinsic strength as my body was breaking down, as my organ systems were shutting down, as I would be hooked up to dialysis every other day and not knowing if I'd survive another day. I had to face my own death. I had to die before you die, as I believe that's Nietzsche says that. You have to die before you die to really be able to fully live. So those experiences provided me with an internal wisdom of understanding that, okay, my life is not infinite here on this physical realm. I have to face my own death here. I was only about 25. I was 25 when I started dialysis for the first time. So that's young to be facing your own death. I do realize that, some people don't make it to 25, but 25 sitting in a dialysis chair every other day, and all of your chair mates are, 50, 60, 70, 80, maybe on their way out of this physical realm, it was quite life-shattering for me. But I really had a way of utilizing my practices to face my own death. Okay, so that being said, that kind of prepared me. Before that, I also had a lot of difficulties growing up. I had some incongruency between my parental dynamics, specifically around Christianity and religion on my father's side, some distorted patterns there and some big incongruencies. And also I had issues on my mother's side, and in that realm seemed to be kind of the opposite of what I was learning from my father's end. So, listen, nobody has a perfect childhood, but I had a lot of emotional nuances that were, really difficult for me growing up. I always felt kind of alone. I always felt like no one really understood me. I remember, being that parentified child, maybe around 5 years old, thinking to myself, well, I guess I got to start taking care of myself now, because the people that are raising me are children pretty much themselves. And for a 5-year-old to kind of wrap their brain around that some way, somehow, I'm sure my language wasn't as articulate, is pretty powerful. That being said, I had these incidences as I was growing up. It started to break me open, break my heart, break me open, help me to realize that there was something beyond this physical realm, and literally die before I die with my incidences with very long-term lupus, which is an autoimmune disease that stemmed into kidney failure, okay? So that was prior to, let's say, around 35. 35 was a pretty pivotal year for me. I started to obviously understand that my life had this deeper sense of purpose and meaning. And at that time, I was knee-deep in running yoga studios. We had multiple yoga studios throughout my career. And working with others and really realizing that the treatment that they were receiving in their own life for their health and wellness wasn't necessarily up to par, at least for the people that I saw at my studio. A lot of people were really beautiful, but looking for deeper ways to find peace, to find balance, to reduce anxiety, to help with their depression, to help them through big changes in life. There was this big field of what I would call maybe, transcendental, transformational work that I didn't really see too much going on in the world. This wasn't as popular as it is now. I mean, now life coaches and spiritual awakening and finding anything you need on YouTube is very accessible. It wasn't this way back then when I started at my yoga studio. So I realized that, okay, my experience has prepared me for this, right? My experience has prepared me to help these individuals along their own experiential journey of waking up to their true self, helping them to face some of these bigger systemic issues that we don't often address in their totality in the world of healthcare, just kind of the modernity, how we treat human beings in modernity so far as, their process in life. Usually it's all very fragmented and very systematized. So, in healthcare specifically, we recently did an interview with a really lovely gentleman named Craig Dury, who wrote a book in regards to bringing the awareness of palliative care out into the public greater. And one thing about that is just what I'm saying here is that why are we waiting until the end of life or near end of life to start to really care and embrace this concept of the transcendence, right? Because I have experience on the other end in the world of Eastern tradition and studying yoga and meditation for over 25 years, this came more natural to me. And when I coalesced these worlds into healthcare when I got sick, I thought, my gosh, are we missing a gigantic piece of this puzzle in healthcare as so far as healing and giving people examples of a subjective experience to help another person integrate their journey. So that being said, I knew my yoga studios were a wonderful avenue for me to connect with people deeper and to start to refine my own skill of what really is it that I want to do in this world? How do I want to help? What are these people teaching me as I'm helping them? So fast forward to my spiritual awakening, all right? This was, gosh, I can't even remember. I was about 35, and I had gotten a phone call. And it's so interesting because about 6 months prior to this phone call, I started to have this overwhelming energetic sensation come over me. And being highly attuned to my own energy system, I was aware. Emanating through me was this feeling of something's gonna happen. Something's gonna happen. And if you've watched my earlier videos, I talk about this. My story hasn't changed, the understanding of it has changed. I knew something was happening. And in fact, I was married at the time, and I would say to my then husband, something's gonna happen. Something's gonna happen. And he got so tired of hearing it, I'd say it once a day continuously, that at some point he just responded and said, okay, what's gonna happen? I'm ready, you keep talking about this. And I could not have known what it was. And either could have he. And it definitely didn't appear to be as exciting as the initial sensation I was having in those moments. But one other thing I wanna mention before the actual event started to happen was that I had a yoga studio in this beautiful small town in Pennsylvania, and it was successful and my marriage was good. everything in my life seemed to be really going well. I'm very dedicated to my well-being, the transcendence and spiritual practices, and I remember verbalizing out loud to myself, because I do this sometimes. As I was walking to my car, I looked at the back of my beautiful yoga studio, and I said, wow, things are going really well. Things are going really well for me. I'm happy. Look at my students are happy. You know, I'm killing it. I'm really spiritually evolving here, you know, and that was a big mistake to say that. Not a mistake, but something that I look back on, you know, with a lot of reverence, because I think that was the moment that God decided he was going to really step in. And I will say this, my life wasn't perfect up until that moment I just described. Obviously, there were lots of ups and downs, but as I proceeded and opened the studios and getting to that point of saying those words, life had drastically improved. I had purpose, I had meaning, I had peace, I had happiness, but I also had a lot of, you know, worldly issues, as we all do as well, you know, little things that arise. But I will say one thing, that on several occasions I noticed, leading up to that moment, that even when I felt really wonderful, it still felt like something was missing. And I could not identify what it was. I just felt there was something else. I wasn't complete. I wasn't totally fulfilled. There was something missing. And that's pretty pivotal as well along this journey, because I think that my soul had been yearning for this greater experience. And that's definitely, as I stand here today, was the missing link. And I can affirm and say today, in this moment, I don't have those feelings where something's missing. I feel inside, spiritually, at peace, and a sense of wholeness. I don't ever feel something's missing. And in fact, if that even crosses my mind for a second, I know that it's something that I need to look at within myself. I'm off balance somehow, some way. So 35, right after I said that, the awakening, you can look back and see the difference and the power, the sheer power of the energy of me explaining this experience, because it was so energetic and I'm very theatrical as I'm explaining it. I think it's like my first or second video on this channel, but there's little deep understanding. I was trying to understand, but you can see I was just really giving this open-hearted experiential story to the world. I wanted to move it through. In fact, I should go back and watch it just to see the difference. Hopefully there's a little bit of a difference. Anyhow, so I got a phone call, and I was invited to do a job at a hospital, a prestigious hospital, to do some of my work with a patient. And this just immediately felt like something I was born to do. And in fact, people around me thought like, wow, Stephanie, your experience has catalyzed, you've manifested this. This is exactly who you are. And the job proceeded, and there were immediately a lot of nuances that I didn't realize were going to be a part of the experience and that I needed to embrace. Please look back on the video if you wanted to see any more of that. But what proceeded very shortly after was the complete, almost annihilation of everything that I had created to get to that point of when I said to you, everything's going great. Got my studio, got my marriage, got my friend, like I'm spiritually sound, everything's great, high on my own supply. I had built this reality, and there were people invested in this reality with me, right? And about 3 months later, it was all gone. All gone, okay? All gone. And at a time where I started to lose kidney function for the second time, and was gonna have to be placed back on a transplant list and go back on dialysis. So yeah, that was a really crazy tower moment, just an existential crisis, and just I'm like, everything, that's it, everything's all out of whack. Because something had come over me. It may seem delusional, naive to make a decision like that so quickly, but my experience had led me to that moment where I remember post-annihilating everything as gracefully as possible. I sat in my car And I said to myself, all right, Stephanie, you're feeling this immense pull towards this path, and you don't know where this path is ending up, but there's this reality, and it had to do with working at the hospital and helping the patient, that it was a very different reality than the one that I was in. And in fact, the two couldn't have come together. In fact, they still don't. But that has catalyzed everything about regenerating healthcare and integration mentors, and all the work that I do now is getting this concept of the sheer power and benefit of the subjective experience as this transcendent place where we can connect in healthcare, and especially people who are going through traumatic illness or not finding ways to help themselves. So basically, and to not make this video too long, everything started to crumble. I made the decision, and in this decision to step back from my life, and one of the first things was to separate from my husband. And again, the wisdom that I had accumulated at that time, I went to my car and I sat in my car and I said, all right, Stephanie, you're being pulled into another world. And I could feel it. Every time I drove my car to this state, because it was at a state, I would have a visceral shift in my body, in my heart, in my mind, my head, in my brain. I literally was going to a different world. It was a different world for me. And it wasn't just a new place or exciting. I was entering a new dimension, something different. And I knew that there was going to be a gap before these two worlds could meet together again. So I sat in my car and I said, all right, Stephanie, if the first thing that you need to do to continue this job is to separate from your spouse, or to try to be honest about what's happening here, if that's the only way you feel you can do this journey, just realize if you make this decision, there's no turning back. That was my higher self, right? That was what I was hearing at the time, that, sit here and really think about, is this what you want to do? And because of circumstances I'm not going to get into here, it was kind of a one or the other at the time, because there was other factors involved. It started to be a much longer job, and I don't want to really get into it, but there was a lot more details to it, honestly. There were some people involved too that were very powerful and shifting my reality around. But I sat in my car and I said, all right, Stephanie, if you do this, there's no turning back. You lose everything here. Look at everything you just said that was great and hunky-dory a couple days ago, and how spiritually sound you are. Well, now something's come across you that you didn't even know existed. Sheer force of this. I'm going to call it God, because that's what it was. And so I realized if I make this decision, there's no turning back, and I don't know how it's going to look. I don't know how I'm going to support myself. I don't know what's going to happen as I continue down with kidney failure. I don't know where I'm going to live. I don't know if I'm going to continue at my yoga studio. A lot. I sat there in my car for close to 2 hours, and I continued to ask myself, who are you, Stephanie? I was talking to myself, okay? Who are you? Who are you? And, at first it was just the traditional labels and roles. I'm a daughter, I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a business owner, I'm a wife, I'm this, I love this, I love this. And this higher self, this voice kept saying, no, it wasn't satisfied. Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? And no matter what answer I gave, the higher self wasn't satisfied until I pictured myself. I didn't know what else to say, but I couldn't get out of my car. It's like I was just paralyzed in that moment until I could come up with the answer that I needed. I pictured myself, without any more words, teaching a yoga class, which I had done, every day, sometimes multiple times a day for many, many years. And I envisioned myself in my confidence, talking to my students and my friends, and the things I would say to them repetitively. And these things were, follow your heart. We live in a world that creates fear. When you're presented with an opportunity, you must go for it. You have the resources, you have the wherewithal. Get out of the head, move into the heart more. Let's fulfill our true purpose and our destiny. Okay, so these are the things that I'm propagating to my students, probably just to not only be of service, but to give me the courage in this moment to remind myself who I was. So that's what it was. I said, I know who I am. I'm a person that encourages people to follow their heart. I tell them to take the road less traveled and see where their destiny is taking them, and to never settle, and to listen to, get out of the head a little bit and really tap into your sensations and what are your feelings telling you, what are your emotions telling you, it's a guidance system. Listen to that. And that's, my higher self was satisfied. And I'm going to say he said, there you go, that's who you are. And then it clicked. I thought, oh, that's what's happening here for me. This is what's going on right now. I'm now being presented, right? I'm being presented with everything that I had propagated, and God was going to see if I was going to take it, even though it looked very chaotic and there was so much uncertainty and fear around it. And I said, oh, okay, if I don't do this and I stay comfortable where everybody likes me and I like to be and it's safe and it's good, there's a lot of love going on in that world for me. But I realized in that moment, if I didn't do it, if I didn't follow my heart into the path of the unknown, which was going to disrupt a lot of people, not just myself, a lot of other people, if I didn't do it, I was a fraud. Those were the words that came through my mind. I don't even remember thinking it. It just was like, if you don't do this, you're a fraud. So it was like, either you are this or you're not this. What's it going to be? So I said, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Okay. So that proceeded into many years leading up to the now moment. Many years of pain, heartbreak, rock bottom, all of the things that I didn't really face, even amongst the traumas and the near-death experiences and the long-term dialysis and health issues. It was different. It was much, much, much different. And I honestly think that a lot of those circumstances were just to give me the strength and the tangible mental and emotional resources to get through this, my awakening. Okay, so it's been years of pain, complexity, shadow work, research, education, surrendering, changing, moving. I've moved many times, following my heart, continuing to take the path less traveled, even when I'm feeling insecure or distrustful or fearful of what's coming next, what am I going to do, what's going on. I kept trusting. I kept having faith. Yes, it was very, very hard. And those were in some of those times. But I realized that I needed those breaking points. I needed those points of complete existential crisis and breakdown for me to really, truly realize and actualize who I was as a person and where I was going. I needed that pain. I hate to say it that way, but that suffering is so transformative, and I haven't yet determined if we can transform without all the suffering. It seems to be the route for many of us, is that this in the suffering creates this purpose. And I wrote a blog a long time ago called The Purpose in the Pain, and it gives meaning, at least, right? So if anything, if you're watching and you're saying, well, I transform and I never have any pain, that's wonderful. I bless you. For most of us, we do. It's our suffering and it's our challenges that create this new being where we really realize our potential, our power, our purpose, and just our connection, and really just the humility of being human. Just the humility. It's like all of the things, all of the material is beautiful, but a lot of it is not necessary. And in fact, the further I go into my life and on this journey, I'm satisfied with less. And ironically, good things happen, but often it's like this process of honoring the simplicity in life and honoring alignment and peace, and not having it to be dramatic or extravagant or luxurious or, I have this many followers here. I don't care about that. I really don't care. I just care about living a full, expressive life and being confident to share myself in an articulate and balanced way. So would I change anything? Absolutely not. Were a lot of things destroyed? A whole world. My old life, a whole life. People were involved, places were involved, people were invested, I was invested. I lost my whole life. But through this process of continuing to follow my heart, integrate it with my mind, find this balance between my masculine and feminine energy, continuing to work on this extraordinary project of incorporating the subjective experience into healthcare and trying to introduce these, I'm going to call them feminine principles of true empathy, compassion, care, transcendence back into medicine prior to hospice or palliative care. It's why I feel like I'm here. And that event of where I was faced with a choice was my awakening. If I could distill it down to anything, yes, there was a lot of circumstances all over the place around it. But what my awakening was a choice. I was presented with two roads. And one was a road that I had been down and I had created, and I saw everything that I had created, and it was beautiful. And the other path was a road that I could not see anywhere where it was going. And I knew in my heart that that was God. And to my old world and my old self, it didn't look like God. But it doesn't matter what it looks like to other people, really. It's about, you and your own journey and realizing your true self. And do I wish that people wouldn't have had to get hurt throughout my process? Yes, but I also realized how much I had been hurting myself, living where I wasn't really the full version of myself. I had done a lot of self-harm, knowingly and unknowingly, in the old life. So for those of you out there, integrating this experience continues. The more I step into it, the more richness and fulfillment and peace I feel, the more comfortable I am with less, the more peace I find in being humble and surrounding myself with humble people who just want to be there for communities and do the right thing and realize that we're not perfect, that we're human, and connect with those real heart-based, like-minded souls who understand that God exists. He's here and now. He's not necessarily a man in the sky. And once you start to connect with that on a day in and day out basis, it doesn't mean your life is perfect, but it does mean that your life will get on the right path, even if you don't know the exact endings. So I'm grateful. I'm so humbled. And I mean, it was the time of my life. It's the time of my life, even through the difficulties the past 6 years or so, the time of my life, the greatest gift, because I know what it's like to die before you die. And I know what it's like to be prepared for no matter what's happening and still have a mustard seed of faith and hope and peace, just peace. And I think honestly, that's really what the world currently is seeking. There's a lot of anger and frustration, but I do know a lot of communities of people who, they feel it. They feel what's going on in the tangible world, but they have a knowing inside. And even though we wish it looked different outside at times, there's this peace and inner knowing that we're just going to continue on the journey. We're going to keep collaborating with other like minds on the journey, and we're going to create the new world. All right, guys, I hope you liked the video. You can subscribe. Please ask me questions if you like. Again, this is just an experiential channel to release and share. And really, it's not for anyone else. It's for me. I can look back and have like a document of my experiences, and I just wanted to share 5 years later. I have a nonprofit that I run with a physician here in Houston called regeneratinghealthcare.org. Check it out, it's pretty awesome. We also have integrationmentors.com, which is where we work on integrating the masculine and feminine and helping people get back on track if they've been off track. We do a lot of work in the healthcare field. So please check it out. And when you do this, guys, when you trust your heart, okay? And you start to go down this path, and you start to clear out some of the things that need to be moved, okay? And it's not just physical items, it's not just your house. It's interesting because I hear a lot of people say when they're kind of working on this awakening and it like the physical comes first. So you'll hear people say, well, I need to get rid of things in my house, or I need to organize my house, or I'm rearranging my house. It's like outside in, right? when you start to shift your environment, inner and outer, you start to create space. And if you're really connected to source, man, you'll be amazed at what comes in, honest to goodness. Just signs, synchronicities. I'm not talking about, I don't want to get into that world, that kind of mystical world too much here. I want to keep it quite grounded, but intelligence, energy. These things are like gold nowadays, energy, having divine energy. And you want to create, you need energy to create. You need energy to move matter in the world. If you're out of alignment and you're in fear, connected to a life that doesn't belong to you, you don't have that energy to create. So yeah, that'll be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and happy Friday.